They called it La Pera, the pear. But this was no fruit. It didn't feed, it destroyed. It didn't rip skin, it tore dignity. A device so silent, yet so cruel. It left no scars, just pain no one could explain. This is the true story of one of the most disturbing torture instruments in history, the Pear of Anguish. At first glance, it looked almost harmless. A small, pear-shaped metal object made of iron with 4 hinged leaves at the top and a screw mechanism at the base. But once inserted into the mouth, vagina, rectum, or even the throat, the screw would be turned, and the petals of the pear would begin to open. Little by little, silently, forcing the body apart from within. There was no blood at first, just pressure, then tearing, then the sound of cartilage, muscle, and bone separating from the inside. The torment was private, intimate, psychological. You screamed, but they said you weren't even bleeding. The exact origin of La Pera is still debated. Some historians believe it first emerged in 15th or 16th century Europe, particularly in Spain, Italy, and France during the time of the Inquisition. Others argue it was used even earlier, during medieval judicial interrogations by local rulers or secret religious tribunals. The design appears in several historical torture manuals from the 1400s to 1600s, often under euphemisms like oral expander, internal punishment tool, or simply instrument of confession. What's clear is this: the pear was real, and it was used. La Pera wasn't just a torture device, it was a tool of domination and suppression. Victims included women accused of witchcraft or adultery, those labeled as heretics or blasphemers, homosexuals, and people who challenged church norms, enemies of political or religious powers. Authorities believe some crimes could be cleansed through pain, but this wasn't cleansing, it was destruction. When placed in the mouth, it could shatter the jaw and silence the accused. When inserted vaginally or rectally, it left survivors unable to speak, not because of law, but from trauma. Some victims lived, most didn't. Depending on how far it was turned, it could dislocate the jaw, tear through muscle and internal tissue, rupture the throat, rectum, or uterus, or cause internal bleeding and death. Some versions ended in a decorative rose or serpent head, giving it a misleading religious look, as if it were a holy artifact rather than a weapon of agony. The horror? The damage was internal. No visible scars, no physical proof. Only silence, trauma, and terror. Most medieval torture tools were public: gallows, wheels, and racks. La Pera wasn't. It was used in silence, behind stone walls, away from crowds. There were no witnesses, no blood, just a scream swallowed in stone. And that's what made it worse. The Iron Maiden crushed the body. The rack pulled you apart, but La Pera entered you. It violated the most vulnerable parts of your body and left nothing for others to see. Even the threat of it was enough to force confessions. People would give up anything, even false information, to avoid it. Some skeptics ask, Was it truly used or just symbolic? While no court log says, "La Pera used today," the evidence is overwhelming. Surviving devices exist in museums in Amsterdam, Prague, and Germany. Torture manuals from the 15th to 17th centuries describe similar expansion instruments. Testimonies from inquisitions mention iron flowers or devices that silence the mouth of sin. It may not have been common, but it was real. And just knowing it existed was enough to terrify generations. In 1623, French magistrate Pierre de Lancre wrote about interrogation tools used during Basque witch trials. One such tool was used to silence accused witches by forcing the devil from the mouth through expansion. In Rome, records from the Inquisition reference iron rupturers, used to silence those accused of mocking the sacraments. Artifacts displayed today, like the one in the Museum of Torture in Amsterdam, show religious symbols carved on the screw, perhaps to justify their use in the name of faith. It wasn't just a tool of violence, it was a weapon of belief. Let's take a step back. What kind of society builds this? A society where the body isn't sacred, where speaking out could mean having your mouth split open from within, where being different in belief, in identity, in sexuality meant becoming a target for something designed to leave no marks. Even today, survivors of psychological torture and abuse report similar feelings: shame, isolation, pain with no physical proof, fear that no one will believe them. La Pera was more than a device. It was a message. We own your body, your voice, your silence. The Pear of Anguish has appeared in horror movies, games like Assassin's Creed and Amnesia, art installations and museums, but many portray it like fantasy, exaggerated and made up. It wasn't. Behind every replica is the memory of a time when pain was policy and silence was enforced with iron. We must remember it not to glorify the horror, but to learn from it. In museums across Europe, La Pera now sits behind glass. People pass by, fascinated, taking photos, laughing nervously. But the real horror is what we can't see. The rooms it was used in, the faces of those who suffered, the stories never told because they were silenced forever. Even today, echoes of its design, tools used for humiliation, silence, and suppression, still exist in some regimes, hidden in shadows. What started as a cold piece of iron became a symbol of control, shame, and fear. If you've watched this far, thank you. This story wasn't easy to tell, but it was harder for those who lived it and died in silence. History is not always light, but truth matters, especially the dark ones people try to forget. So here's the question I leave you with. If fear and shame were once enough to silence truth, are we sure it's not still happening today, just in different forms?